So welcome back to everyone. Just wanted to give my recap on the last week's worth of sport. The big stories specifically, I'm going to be focusing on a couple of stories in rugby, not much this week to talk about in the rugby. I'm also going to do quite a big recap on the football, generally speaking, the Premiership and some European news, and also talk about the recent Formula 1 GP in China. So we're going to start off with the rugby. Now, one of the first news is the loss for Wales of Tipperich to an injury. Tipperich suffered a concussion in the final Six Nations game against Italy, and he's been advised to spend up to 3 months off. Now, this is a big blow for Wales, as they're going to miss him badly on the pitch, as they need some strong leadership now more than ever, especially in the run-up to the summer internationals coming up. If he's not able to start for that could be a big blow. Wales has been suffering without Sam Warburton recently, and the loss of Tipperich in the back row is really going to be felt by them. Wales have recently been struggling with a lot of injuries, and they need to get a cohesive unit together if they want to improve. Moving on to another slightly bigger story, in that South Africa have appointed Alistair Coetzee as their head coach following the departure of Heineke Meyer. Now, Meyer oversaw generally a World Cup campaign that, although it got South Africa to the semi-finals, also saw them lose to Japan. Now that was a bit of a disaster after their loss to Japan. As I was actually saying to many people at the time, anything other than an out-and-out victory for them will be seen as a disaster. South Africa also coming off the back of a very disappointing championship campaign in the Southern Hemisphere, where they finished bottom. Now, Coetzee previously has experience as assistant coach with South Africa and was part of their team during the 2007 World Cup in France. Now, Coetzee's going to have quite a job, as the South African team will require, basically, from my opinion, a complete rebuild. They've got some aging players who need replacing. Now, they're going to need to look to the upcoming summer internationals against Ireland to try and get some of the young players into the squad to prove their mettle. They can't rely on the old guard anymore, and they're going to look for this as a test bed for the championships. They will look to beat Ireland. Ireland, again, also coming off the back of a disappointing Six Nations campaign. They're going to look to, a rebuild, but more of a moral build for them. But South Africa really needs to test and try and make provisions in place, get provisions in place, in place for the championship. Now, moving on to the football, quite a lot to talk about. A fair bit went on. So we're going to start with Arsenal, who drew 1-1 with Palace, despite what was a pretty dominant game for them. They controlled most of the game, and they did go 1-0 up just on the stroke of half-time when Welbeck and Sanchez linked together quite well. However, towards the end of the game, around the 78th minute, Balassi found some room on the edge of box to beat Cech at his near post, and Cech will have wanted to have done better. He should have been saving that. But the result does mean that City will go above Arsenal into third place. As Arsenal's poor form continues, they just can't seem to get some good results together. Leicester, on the other hand, well, they drew 2-2 with West Ham in a good match, but it was marred by the sending off of their top scorer Jamie Vardy after he received 2 yellow cards. Now, Vardy had put Leicester 1-0 up before he had his second yellow for basically making the most of a decision. And West Ham made it West Ham went 2-1 up with late goals from Carroll and Creswell, both in, I think it was the 82nd and 86th minute, before a penalty in the dying seconds was converted for Leicester by Joa. Now, the game was noted for the inconsistency in the refereeing decisions. I don't like blaming referees, but I'm not even going to blame the referee on this one. I just think we need more consistency in decisions, and part of that, from my point of view, needs to think that we need to get players to not surround referees. I think if referees don't feel under pressure, don't feel like, oh, I've made a mistake, I must correct it, I don't believe that we will get inconsistencies in the decision in their decision making in the games. However, that's maybe a discussion for another time. But it was a 2-2 draw, which I think Leicester will be disappointed with, especially when they're trying their best to consolidate their Premiership title challenge. Moving on to Manchester City, who boosted their Champions League automatic qualification hopes with a 3-0 win over Chelsea, mostly down to a hat-trick from Aguero. Exactly the shot in the arm City needed. They haven't been great recently. They've lost ground on the title race, and with Arsenal faltering, they're going to need to boost their qualification campaign. And this is exactly the shot in the arm that they needed. They'll also be really happy to get De Bruyne back, as he was at the centre of all of City's good play and showed why he's been sorely missed since he's been out injured. Now, Chelsea did lose Thibaut Courtois to a red card, which compounded the result. They were already 2-0 down. They were going to lose that, but that's really not what they needed when they're trying to push as hard as they can for a European place. It is extremely unlikely. That's not going to help their matters, though. But great win for City, and exactly what they needed, especially after Man U recorded their 1-0 win over Aston Villa to confirm Villa's relegation from the Premiership. Goal came thanks to one of the youngsters again, Rashford, who is putting in the other sort of the other strikers and forwards at United to shame. Now this, coupled with West Ham failing to beat Leicester, moves Man U 3 points clear of West Ham in 5th, and it also keeps them breathing down the next to the top 4. They lie 4 points off Arsenal and City, albeit their goal difference is vastly inferior. Now going down to the bottom of the table, Norwich suffered a huge major blow and they lost 3-0 to Sunderland thanks to goals from Defoe, Barini and Duncan Watmore. Now this drags them all the way into the relegation battle as they find themselves only 1 point ahead of Sunderland. Now Newcastle also recorded a 3-0 win over Swansea to really give their survival chances a shot in the arm and move them within 3 points of Norwich with a similar goal difference. This was a much improved performance from Newcastle, who got their goals from Lascelles, Sissoko and Townsend. Now this is going to make a really interesting relegation battle, as there is very little between these 3 teams. I really can't predict who will go down. My gut feeling is Sunderland will survive. Sam Allardyce, the one thing he is great on is a survival battle. That is where he earns his money. He is great at digging out, and he is great at getting the best out of a relegation scrap. Now, I'm going to move outside of the Premiership and talk actually about Scottish football, which is been given a shot in the arm by Rangers, playing out a 2-2 draw with Celtic in the Scottish Cup semi-final and going on to win 5-4 on penalties in a really fiercely fought encounter. Now, Celtic certainly dominated the overall proceedings in terms of shot count. They didn't dominate possession, but they had 33 shots to Rangers' 9. But they didn't make the numbers count. I mean, you can't have 33 shots and only score 2. It's not great, but Rangers will go on to play Hibs in the final, as they also seek to return to the Scottish Premier Division, and this will give them a lot of confidence. Very disappointing for Celtic, though. They are not going to want to lose. They're never going to want to lose to Rangers. This is possibly the fiercest football rival you get, and this is going to be. They're going to see this as an embarrassment, especially seeing as Rangers haven't been in the same division for many years, or for a few years now. Moving on to the Champions League, Atletico Madrid took maybe a surprise 2-0 win over Barcelona to overturn the 2-1 first leg deficit, book a place in the semi-final. Bit of a surprise, I think, even though they got the away goal. I think everyone was thinking Barcelona would still get through to this, but credit to Atletico, they really hung in there and made sure that they made their chances count. Now, elsewhere, Real Madrid overturned a deficit, a 2-0 deficit to Wolfsburg, by winning 3-0 at home to seal their semi-final slot. That was a great turnaround. That's exactly what they needed. Barcelona have been faltering a little bit, and success in the Champions League should hopefully for Real Madrid convert to success in the domestic league. Now this is going to set up a juicy tie for Real Madrid, as they will face Manchester City in the semi-finals after Man City got a 1-0 win over PSG. Again, Man City doing well in the Champions League, whereas they have been struggling in the Premier League. I think they will use this as a boost for their Premier League European campaign. Elsewhere, Bayern Munich scrapped a 2-2 draw with Benfica, which gives them a 3-2 on aggregate overall, and this means not the greatest result for Barcelona, but they got through and they'll be happy to get through. This sets up a semi-final which will see Atletico Madrid face Bayern Munich. Now, this how I feel this is going to pan out. I think we're going to see a Munich-Real Madrid final. I genuinely think Real are going to have enough in the bank to overcome Man City, and I think Munich are just generally have been a lot more consistent recently than Barcelona have. I think we'll see Munich-Real in the final, and tough one to call. I'd like to see Bayern Munich take it. I just like their style a little bit more than Real's, and I think they've been a little bit more, again, overall consistent than Real have been. So my tip for that one would be a Bayern win. Now, finally, we're going to talk about the Formula One. The Chinese Grand Prix took place over the weekend and resulted in Nico Rosberg extending his lead at the top with his third straight win of the season. It was an incident-packed race that saw both Ferraris colliding together on the opening lap. They did both recover, though. Vettel finished second, whilst Raikkonen went on to finish in fifth. Rounding out the podium was Danny Kvyat for Red Bull, although there were some harsh words from Vettel, who believed he caused his collision, the collision between him and his teammate, and Vettel has made his feelings on that very clear. Now, Lewis Hamilton drove a very good race, despite requiring 5 pit stops and starting last on the grid. He managed to move up to 7th place, which is very, very good driving, although he has lost further ground to Rosberg in the drivers' race. That means that Rosberg is firmly in first place in the drivers' standing with 75 points. Hamilton's second on 39, despite his 5th place, and Ricciardo just behind him for Red Bull on 36. Now, that means Mercedes are consolidating their control on the overall Constructors' Championships with 114 points, ahead of Ferrari on 61 and Red Bull on 57. Now, this is going to be a little bit disappointing for Ferrari. The pre-season did seem to indicate they were going to mount a much more serious challenge on the Mercedes pairing of Hamilton and Rosberg, but it doesn't seem to have quite materialised yet. Like I said, they are a great team, and they've got a lot of time to make it up in it. We're only a few races into the season, but if they can't afford to have incidents like this again where they're taking each other out. People can argue that it was caused by other things. However, they can't afford to let that get on. They're going to have to make Mike a strong challenge in the next races. They might have to take a few risks to ensure that they go ahead, but that's how I have seen the last week's worth of sports results going. Be interested to hear what everyone else has to think. If anyone has any comments, love to hear from you guys. Stick your name down, stick a comment down, and hope to hear from people soon. Thanks a lot.